Hello, Aldwyn Altuney here, coming to you live with the amazing Brenda Adelman, all the way from San Diego. Hello, Brenda, great to see you.
Hi, thanks. So nice to see you too.
So great to have you with us. I'm so excited. We have a full session with you next week for the Mass Media Tribe meetup. We're talking about making your story unforgettable. We're going to give our viewers a bit of a taste of what we'll be talking about next week. So before we have you chat, Brenda, I'll just introduce you here and give people a bit of background about you. Now, Brenda is the daughter of a Jewish father and artist mother. She grew up in the Mill Basin section of Brooklyn in New York. A fan of Broadway shows since childhood, she studied acting at several prestigious schools in London, New York, and Los Angeles. In 1995, her mother, an award-winning artist and photographer, was shot to death in her home. Brenda's father pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter and served 2.5 years in prison. Afterwards, Brenda, along with her brother, filed a wrongful death suit against her father and won, but her father died of a heart attack before the awarded damages could be collected. With a degree in spiritual psychology, Brenda wrote a one-woman show, My Brooklyn Hamlet, based on her life story. She has performed this show all around the world, often in conjunction with V-Day, the movement founded by Eve Ensler, dedicated to stopping violence towards women. Wow, Brenda, what an extraordinary story you have, and amazing that you have put this into a one-woman show, which I've heard from those that have seen it, it is amazing. So what has it taken for you, Brenda, to come from that life to actually, coming to be okay with your past and being able to share your story, which is so powerful and so horrific in so many ways? I have no idea how you've done that. So I'm very curious. What is your secret?
Yeah, actually, I was already an actress when my father killed my mom, and I definitely, I really lost everything in that night as far as my family. And I went into a depression, and it was really starting to write my story first for myself on the pages of my journal during my sleepless nights that started to heal me, because instead of being in my head like, I wish I could turn back time, I hate my father, I love my father, instead I could actually witness what I went through. Like, instead of like, I'm going to forgive him, I hate him, I forgive him, I witnessed what I went through, and I was able to kind of get it out of my head, out of my heart, write it down, witness it, love myself for what I had been through. And then it was like a divine spark. I got back into acting class about a year later, and I'd kind of hide behind the characters I was playing, afraid to really be too emotional because I thought I'd lose it. And then it was a divine spark one night when I was writing that I wrote one of the poems that I had written, which was very dark, into a scene that I would then put up on stage in a storytelling exercise, not ever thinking I would have now a critically acclaimed one-woman show that I performed in 4 countries and 10 states. I just needed to express myself and be seen and witnessed, but I was terrified, thinking I'd be so judged, because back then I was so filled with shame. But instead, I got a standing ovation in this top acting class. A producer wanted to work with me, a director wanted to work with me, and that's kind of how that began. And it was so healing, though, as time went on. Like, as an actor, you're familiar with acting. You can't play a character as evil. It would be one note. It wouldn't be good acting. So actually jumping into the character of my father, because I play about 10 characters, was healing for me to see that this is a man that had dreams that didn't manifest. He had mental illness, I'm sure. There were other things involved that actually helped my healing.
They say that hurt people, which is such a powerful statement. And I've noticed that, in my life, when I've had people that have been hurting around me, that have been nasty, and, and I send them love and compassion, it can be challenging sometimes to do that, because sometimes some behavior is just out of line, right? Well, it is out of line, and we can't control what other people do. However, coming to that place of we can control how we respond, and the more anger we have around situations or resentment, we're just eating ourselves up and hurting ourselves from the inside. So we really need to protect our own energy. So how has that been for you, Brenda? What's that journey been like for you to come to a place of healing and peace around this situation with your
Yeah,
father?
actually, there are a couple of things there that you said that were really important. Forgiving my father in some ways had nothing to do with him. It had everything to do with me. It had to do with the fact that when I thought about him, my whole day wasn't wrecked because I'm hurting myself with that. He's not doing anything. I
Yeah.
had this really big insight that if I hated him, I hated me because I was a part of him. He was a part of me. And then I realized, well, I'm not going to do that anymore. And then the other thing was, and this was really big for me, and I did go back to school to get a master's in spiritual psychology to kind of not only act out things on stage, because I would act out things on stage. This is why I teach storytelling. And then even though it was somewhat healing, I'd go home and be absolutely miserable because I didn't know how to process it. So I went, got my master's degree. That really changed everything for me to learn not only what's happening, but how do I heal myself as I'm expressing this. And what was I going to say about, oh yes, and learning that I needed to let go of ever needing anything from him. So like I couldn't expect him to take responsibility. That again is on me. I have the power to say, I don't need anything from this man. But the other really important thing, because I've been teaching forgiveness since 2005, before I started teaching storytelling, is that I realized I did not fully heal until I expressed my anger, but in a really healthy way, not expecting anything from him, not acting out, but actually acknowledging how angry I was in the context of my master's program or going to a primal scream workshop or doing spiritual stuff, doing freeform writing, like very specific exercises, because I spent so much time trying not to be angry that I would be angry. Some people have addictions. I would, overeat, over exercise. I would keep people away because I was so filled with that anger and I didn't want people to see it. And of course, it was all unconscious at the time. So I feel like I have a 3-step forgiveness process, and I really only started healing when I acknowledged my anger in a very deep and healthy way. And that is in step 1 of my process versus, 6 years later when I started really looking at it.
So now I'm curious about your 3-step forgiveness process. Would you like to share that?
Yeah, let's see what I can remember. I have a Kindle book, actually. It's called My Father Killed My Mother and Married My Aunt, Forgiving the Unforgivable, that it's in, which is part memoir and part my 3-step process. And the reason I did it like that is because I wanted to show people where I was in the process and where the exercises go. So step 1 is moving out of denial and into acceptance of what is. Obviously, if you're already like, I'm so angry, that is not going to apply to you. But for those people who are like really in denial, like I didn't want to believe my father put a gun to my mother's head and killed her. I wanted to believe his lies that they were, fighting and the gun went off. He didn't know who pulled the trigger despite the evidence. But there are people and clients I've had that, their partner is cheating on them, but they want to believe they're not, or someone's an addict and they want to believe their lies. So the first step in my process is moving out of denial and into acceptance of what is. When I finally accepted that my father actually did this, is when the real anger could come up. The real, it actually in this step is where you embrace the victim. So I feel like a lot of people skip over it because we so desperately don't want to be a victim that we end up being a victim because we're in our head and we're making excuses, or it's like, okay, I'm just going to go to forgiveness, but yet we're doing addictions, doing things to like distract ourselves. So you actually want to fully embrace the victim. So in this stage, one of the exercises would be, doing some kind of writing that is like, I'm so angry, he did this, he did that, like really going for it versus trying to rationalize. So then you don't want to stay in that stage. The second step, after you've done that in a healthy way with a therapist maybe, or with a coach, or whatever you need to do to take care of yourself, then that was something I did in my 2-year master's degree personally. And it's something my coaching clients work with, or my writing clients, if they have something to heal. But then the next step is giving up your need to be right. That's actually giving up your righteousness. But it's almost like you have to really acknowledge it so you can give it up and give it up fully. And in that stage, the exercises I teach are things around self-judgment and judgments of others. Semantically, it's something like, I forgive myself for judging my father as abandoning me. The truth is that nobody can abandon me. I have myself, or whatever the reframe is. And if you're not ready to reframe it, you go into, and the truth is I'm open to believing that there's nothing to abandon. I am full, I am whole, I am complete, I am here for myself. That's step 2. And then step 3, not everybody gets here, but, or sometimes it takes longer, would be not gratitude for what happened. Like, I'm not grateful my father killed my mother, but I am grateful for my resilience. I'm grateful that it put me right on my path. I'm grateful that it woke me up. So it's finding the gratitude so that we move out of, having a life where we feel like a victim, so that we're empowered. And in that step, the exercises are more like a way to get into that would be like volunteering, getting out of your own head, like realizing that there are other people in the world that, there's always going to be people who have dealt with more and less than us. So that's a really great way, is like volunteer with animals or, kids or something like that. Realize that you don't have to be alone in your suffering or obsession or thinking about the past, like getting out of yourself.
Yeah, I love that. There's some fantastic tips there, because the fact is, life is full of ups and downs. It's full of unexpected twists and turns. And really, you don't have control over any of that, right? You have control over you and how you respond. And that's where the power is. And I love that, coming into gratitude, there's always some kind of breakthrough at the end of every breakdown. And we're talking today about making your story unforgettable. And it's really looking at those low points, those struggles we've had, and how we can turn those into positives as part of our story and share that. So where do you start, Brenda, with clients that want to share their story and they think, gosh, where do I start with my story?
Yeah, I have a very, very specific process, and we'll be going into it when I teach in your community, because that's one of the biggest challenges people have. They come to me and they're like, I've just had such a big life. I have so much stuff. And then there's the added element of, but I want to use this for my business. And how does this fit in my business? I have never, ever, and I've worked with so many people, found a story that does not fit with someone's business. There's a way to connect it because we're so unique. We've had these events happen so that we could use them. So it's just a process of looking at the main events in the person's life, and then seeing if there's any repeated patterns, or repeated patterns also based on each unique individual's experiences with life. Like, I could look at something that happened in my life and look at it and see it as abandonment, whereas someone else could look at it and see it as betrayal. Like, that's the kind of stuff that we go into based on the person's life story.
Okay, so there's a whole process we'll need to uncover. We will uncover next week in the Mass Media Tribe event.
Yeah.
In the meantime, is there any tips you can give on people who do want to share their story? Any tips on how they can do that powerfully once they do work out where they want to start with their story?
Yeah. Well, first, I want to mention I'm doing a free webinar on this Friday at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, so they can get on there and they can ask me questions, and I'm kind of giving a process there. So some tips, definitely attend that. You sign up, there'll be a replay, and that's the best way, because then I can tell you specifically, based on at the end of it, specifically what you would do. Generally, how to share your story powerfully. The reason why I teach healing through story too is that you want to be clear. You want to be a clear vessel, kind of like an actor is a clear vessel. You have to know, what do you do? What are your habits? If you get triggered by something, do you fly off the handle? Because then if you're acting in a scene and someone does something that you're not aware of, that bothers you. Like, I've been in acting class where 2 men on stage literally got into a fight because one of the people, in a scene was, did something, and the person was triggered from his father and like punched him back. It's like, you have to know who you are. You have to heal yourself, be whole, so that you can share everything with the audience, but you also feel safe. So one thing is, I don't like when guru coaches are saying, you got to be vulnerable. You got to be vulnerable. You got to be vulnerable. Yes, you have to be vulnerable, but there's a reason you might feel vulnerable around a story. So what I would say is, choose a story that you know is honest and authentic and makes you feel vulnerable, because that will connect with the audience. But make sure you're doing your inner child work. Make sure you have healed it to an extent so that you're not just like putting it out there and then you want to run away, and then it defeats the purpose of being visible. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. Yep, absolutely.
So that would be one thing. It's like choosing those stories first. And the other thing would be choose stories that are juicy for you, that mean something. Because if it doesn't mean anything to you, you can trust me when I say this, it won't mean anything to the audience. The other thing is, it's like if you're choosing stories to share, even if it's a really big event, this is one challenge I see with people. If you haven't learned storytelling, you might have such a great story, or you understand why the characters are so juicy, because I've had this happen with clients, and then because you know the story so well, you don't articulate it. It's like it's in your head. It's like that whole thing, if someone says think about a cat, and in my head I think of maybe Siamese, because I had Siamese cats growing up. Someone else thinks of a tabby, but I just say and think about a cat, someone will just think cat. Like, you won't have the richness. You have to say, oh, and then I had my Siamese cat that licked my hand. And of course, I mean, there's so much in telling a good story. It's like, then you could talk about the texture of the cat's tongue. Like if it meant something, and then that brings something alive for the audience member who might have a cat, instead of just saying, and then the cat, I saw the cat on the window. Like, so this other woman I was talking to had these rich characters in her story, her parents that were love and in hate, but she didn't say anything like that. She just said, her story didn't make sense. It was so clear in her head. So it's like, you know your story so well, but that's why you have to like practice it, get a coach, check in with the people you're talking to see if they really understand what you're saying.
Yeah, because often we're too close to our story, right? We're too close to what we do, and of course it makes sense for us, and very complex sometimes for other people to understand.
Right.
So I think that's really great to be able to work with someone who can draw those gems out of people and say, oh, I really like that part of your story, or that part, or that really resonates.
Exactly. When I did my one woman show one time, I remember I did an informal showcase as I was creating it, and I invited an audience, and then I had like 5 questions. What did you like most? Was there something you didn't understand? Like, there's many levels to telling a really great story. So that's why it's important to keep working on it until it's the best it can be. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And can you tell us a bit about your one-person show that you've been doing lately? And are you doing some more of those, or what's been happening with that lately? I know you've been on the media everywhere. You've been all over the place.
Yes, I was on CBS and Good Morning San Diego recently. I have done my show. This is the same show that I've done in person all over the world. It is the gift that keeps on giving. It's why I teach the art of the one-person show, but it also could be, your talk, but it's in a very creative way that really stands out. It's why I get booked all the time. What's super cool is that I have done it virtually, like this hybrid of theater and camera. In February, I did it in Los Angeles in a theater, and I just did it in San Diego. It was produced by 2 theaters here in San Diego. And there was no audience because of COVID, but it was a 3-camera shoot both times. It was an interesting experience because it's different than just having a filmed production. Because when you're doing a filmed production, the cameras are in the audience. This is like cameras up close, but you're also performing for a theater. So that's what has garnered so much attention. My show is based on my life story, but I play 10 characters, and about 10 characters, and it's about the power of forgiveness, and I use Shakespeare in it, and it's a very Brooklyn story, but when the emotions are too much, I have a few soliloquies from Hamlet, because other people would sing, but people would run out of their room if they're watching it on video if they heard me sing. So I know how to do Shakespeare, so I do Shakespeare. And then in February, I also got into a film story festival. Again, a blessing of COVID, maybe, because there was a theater company out of New York City that, because of COVID, instead did kind of a storytelling theatrical Zoom festival. And so I submitted 15 minutes of my longer show into that, and I got into that. So that was super cool too.
Wow, awesome.
And this is what I teach. This is what I teach my storytelling students. Yeah.
Awesome. And how important is it, do you think, for people to share their stories?
I think it's everything. Like I've had the honor, because I'm so vocal about my story and, that my father killed my mother, it's a big one. And about forgiveness, that a lot of my clients that come to me have been through really big stuff. I feel like the biggest thing is to tell your story for yourself so that you can heal. Like, instead of hiding, so many people have just been hiding their entire lives for survival, but then they take it on. They internalize like an abusive parent. They internalize their voice and then stay silent. So for themselves, it's important. And then, I've worked with clients who have had just horrible abuse, sexual abuse when they were kids. And I've witnessed them in my in-person classes too, when I had them. Again, they are people who have already done a ton of work. They're going to therapy, they're doing all this stuff, and they have the desire to heal. But I've witnessed them take their power back from an abuser by telling their story in the way they want to tell it, in an empowering way, in a healing way. So, it's everything. And then people in the audience are just mesmerized, and then it activates people in the audience who have been abused or who haven't, or they know someone who might have been. Like, it's the connection, because all of my work is about being so real and being authentic. And sometimes that people are doing humorous stuff, but what they've learned, like one person I think had 5 divorces. So we have some serious stuff in there, but then we have the funny stuff, or like what we didn't see, but now we see, so there's so many like lessons and connection, and it's just about connecting truthfully, it's awesome.
I love that. Yeah. And the thing is too, with stories, some people go, oh, my story is not as good as your story, and that comparison can come out. But, the fact is, I think we all attract, situations that happen for us, not to us. And if you stand in a place where you're 100% responsible for everything that you attract into your life, whether you like to think that or not, it's a very powerful place to stand. And actually being able to look at yourself and look at your stories and go, now, what have I learned from that? What's the opportunity in that? I think is a huge thing for people.
Oh yeah, some people think their story's too big, no one will relate. That's what I thought. And then what I realized is, oh yeah, people relate to love, loss, betrayal, those things. And it's the same thing. The other half of my clients think they don't. So I have the people who've been through a lot, and then I have people who are like, oh, I haven't been through all of that, so it's not good enough. And first of all, you're lucky you didn't go through that. And then the other part of it is, I always find that those people have big stories. They just don't have dramatic stories. So they have stories where they had oftentimes at least one family member that was maybe narcissistic, or someone who didn't like, they felt so alone in life that it affected their choices, or they, like, people say they don't have a story, and it's just that I think for survival, we're like, oh, well, that's not a big deal that I was heartbroken and that person cheated on me. Yes, it is. That's your story. That's why you haven't ever chosen to fall in love again. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's so many ways to heal. Once, like, I think what I do is I ask the right questions and I prompt them, and so that they realize their life is so valuable. It's just getting the right pieces of it to share to make it compelling.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's huge and so powerful and so healing, because so many people also shut down parts of their story. I know with myself, I had an incident happen when I was 6 where I saw a sheep I befriended in Turkey have its throat cut in front of me, and I completely blocked that out of my memory for years, until I was doing a personal development course, and they said, something happens in life, you make it mean something, something happens, you make it mean something. And, through life, this is how we go. And we tend to attract similar situations that match our beliefs and what we believe to be true. And sometimes some horrific traumatic things from the past, we can just completely shut out. And however, it doesn't go away, does it? Because it gets buried into the body. Like I had depression for years. So that's the thing,
Oh.
is actually being able to release your story on stage,
Mhm.
being able to let it out, as you say, is very healing. And have you found that people have actually come to your courses and maybe they've had some illness or ailment in their body, and then when they've shared their story, they've actually become healed physically from that ailment?
Well, it is interesting that this one person I'm thinking about who did have horrible abuse when she was younger, while she was working on the story, I mean, she had gone to lots of chiropractors and all this kind of stuff. And while she was working in the class, she kind of had almost like an amplification of some of the things that were happening. But I know, like, that that's just part of the healing process, right? So she was still going to the practitioners and stuff like that while she was in the class. And so I'm okay. Like, I feel like everybody knows what they need to do for themselves, but I know the healing's on the other side of it. And so, it was so amazing. The day of the class, her sharing it, like, it was like all this extra stuff and more just left. She was standing taller. It was just gone because the body was like holding on to that stuff. And it was like she took her power back. It was incredibly beautiful to watch, and to have faith, but intuitively too, to have faith that I knew she would do what she needed to do for herself. But I'm not afraid to be like, okay, it's hard. Yeah, it is hard. And when you get to the other side, oh my God, there's so much freedom or health or whatever it is. Like I used to have really bad digestive stuff, which kind of just, or I remember when I was doing my one woman show the very first time, my neck, I remember like right before I was opening night, my neck was like this. And my my director, who's very spiritual, is like, I don't know, that's the masculine side of your body or something like that. And she kind of massaged it and then it just went away. It was like, I had my voice. So, you know what I'm saying? I think it's really, really healthy. And of course, Louise Hayes anyway talks about, says, the liver is attached to the anger and stuff like that. So that's why all of this is so healthy. But I will say that telling your story on stage is a conscious decision. You have to know who you're sharing your story with. It's not like just share with anyone, especially if you are deciding to tell your story on stage. You still want it to be in a very nurturing atmosphere, because sometimes people think they're helping and they see that you're not feeling well and they're like, oh, you shouldn't be doing it. But that's because they're emotionally not facing this stuff, and they want to take care of you, but that will just shut your muse down instead of, that's why I have these 6-week classes. I have things that are like nurturing the muse and what you need to do to heal, but you don't have to tell every story. You definitely don't have to tell every story in public, not when you're not ready.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And I guess there'd be different reasons for people sharing their stories. A lot of people in business now are sharing their stories to connect with people. People want that connection. They want to see that you're a real person, that they can relate. So it's actually, it's a really good thing to do for business as well as for life, to share your story with your family, to, as a release.
Yeah. I mean, I have a client who just worked on a story in one of my first rounds, 6-week rounds. She worked on a story for her business. And then she decided to work on a personal story about a time in her life that she was so happy, because she wanted to bring more of that into her life. And it was amazing. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can write your life into being just by choosing the stories you work on too.
Absolutely. So you've got your masterclass coming up. You've got an event coming up. Could you tell us a little bit more about that? And I'll look for the link for that to share with people.
Yes, that is this Friday at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Let me see if I'll tell you what I know from memory, which is not a lot because I'm doing 12 things. But
yes.
It's I think it's about 60 minutes, maybe 90 minutes. It's a really good webinar, like about and masterclass about what stops you. Like, you say you want to tell your story, but what stops you, and also how to deal with the emotional components of it so that you can share your story powerfully.
Awesome. And that's a link there, free webinar.
It's the Confident Storyteller, so that you're confident no matter what you're sharing.
So what time? That's Friday.
That's Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So I think that's the next day.
Yeah, 2 p.m. So it'll be about an hour and a half from now. wherever you are at the next day. For Australia, it will be Saturday at about 2 p.m. or so, I think.
Maybe
So,
I think later, right? Because we're 7:45 p.m. my time right now.
okay, so this Friday at so what time your time again? PST?
p.m. Pacific time, which is 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And there will be a replay. So if you can't make it, if it's like some ungodly hour, as long as you sign up, you'll get the replay as well.
People can just go to that link anyway. This Friday.
Right.
I'll just put PST or LA time, PST time. Here we go. Yeah, the confident storyteller. And confidence comes with practice, doesn't it? And it comes
it comes with skill. Comes with skill and practice, and seeing confidence. If people lean in. That's why it's important to be in a class, because if you're telling a story on video and you're just looking at a circle, you have no idea how people are really receiving it, right? That's why if you're a beginner, you want to get feedback.
Yeah, fantastic. That'll be brilliant. Excellent. So get along to there if you want to find out more about how to be a confident storyteller and share your story. We'll be wrapping up shortly. Also, we have the Mass Media Tribe event next week at this time as well. That's on Thursday, the 3rd of June, Gold Coast time, Australian time. And
right, that'll be a really good teaching. And I do have my program, Your Unforgettable Presence, coming up the following week too. That's a 6-week program on how to tell your story with confidence on video. So it all kind of ties together.
All right, so you'll let us know about that at our event next week, which will be it'll be the 2nd of June LA time, PST. Perfect. It'll be 7 p.m. on the 2nd of June, and it'll be 12 noon on the 3rd of June, Australian Eastern Standard Time. And we're going for 2 hours in the Mass Media Tribe event. We'll have some introductions from people who come along. I'll be presenting a segment on how to get free publicity, and then Brenda will present her section on making your story unforgettable, and then we'll have some giveaways at the end. You must be on the live Zoom to attend. We do have the link in the comments here where you're watching this. If you have joined us, let us know, where are you coming to us from right now? Where are you joining us from? And what did you get out of this interview? If you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook, let us know in the comments. Love to hear from you. Anything else you'd like to share with us today, Brenda?
No, it's just been a pleasure being on. I love when I can talk about the forgiveness stuff too, because it's so much on purpose for me. So please, anyone who wants to ask questions, please do, and show up next on the 2nd, my time, 3rd your time, I think.
Yes, next week, around this time
Friday.
Next week. Yeah, and Friday will be amazing as well. Yeah, so get to that link. That sounds amazing. Thank you so much, Brenda, for your time. I know how incredibly busy you are and the amazing work you do. Keep up the fantastic work. It's really been fantastic to get to know you and to connect with you across the Pacific, across the oceans, across from Australia to America. And
thank you.
Wishing you all the best with your upcoming events. And thank you so much for joining us. If you have been watching this, I love to stay connected with you too. So please do so on Eventbrite. If you follow Aldwyn Altuney on Eventbrite, you'll see all our upcoming events. We have the Global Good News Challenge as well coming up in June. I have a free publicity webinar also next week called How to Gain $1 Million Worth of Free Publicity. So that's a 90-minute webinar I'm doing next week. So just follow me in Eventbrite and you will see all that, or just Google us. You'll find us, connect with us, and let us know if we can help you with anything. All right. Have a beautiful day. Remember to shine bright and light up those around you. And as Gandhi says, be the change you want to see in the world. Thank you so much. Thank you, Brenda. See you again soon. Bye.